working. Can you hear me? Thank you. A pretty interesting day today, I suppose. We've covered almost everything. This is the trickiest part of politics, that you put me in front of you and between you and the food. So it's already TGIF, and I'm here between you and your best time. But if we look at AI, we've looked at everything. We've looked at large language models. What are the larger macroeconomic ramifications of AI? If we look at what's going on, this last Tuesday, the United States and China had a G2G interaction on AI. And once again, the same cat and mouse game continued. China is looking for ways to outdo America, and America is restricting chips and AI and all the other software. And what are the Indians doing? We are waiting for our H-1B to go and work for the big companies in the US. But I guess it gives me a little solace from the fact that there were founders and unicorn makers before me on this stage. So I'm hoping that in the very near future, there will be Chinese and Americans who will be looking for a visa to come to India. But chips are a foundational technology. I've had this exercise multiple times. If we were doing this exact event Moneycontrol was doing 100 years ago, what all would be different in this room? If you look at everything which will be different, has some role of silicon and semiconductors to get it to where it is. The camera, the lighting, LED lighting, which is also semiconductors. Food, I'm sure Changiz Khan had the same galati kebabs which you guys had. So we have some similarity out there. We have the same food, maybe the furniture was similar kind, but all the electronics, all the polyester clothing, all comes based on silicon, some way or the form. The computers are used for all that. Now, semiconductors is a foundation where America and China are fighting it out, but India is a very strong player, where Indian scientists are the ones which power the fabs and the design centers of the world. The amount of Indian talent which is playing a role is phenomenal, and it is a matter of pride for the country. And now we have also invested $10 billion. We'll have semiconductors in India. AI, we have talked a lot about it. But from an investor perspective, I think what's more important to know is which AI application is going to give me the best ROI. And believe me, like every technology hype before, AI is not going to take up everything. That's my humble opinion. But there'll be some which will outshine and some won't. But there are some other things which are also very important to be taken care of. When cars came and motorcycles came and all these transportation vehicles came in, nobody told us to stop walking. But today, walking is an exercise. We have treadmills in our houses. Then computers came, smartphones came, and we stopped writing. In Europe and in many other countries, they have stopped teaching kids how to write. So the writing is going bad. You're like the doctor's handwriting, only the chemist can read it. My own handwriting comes with an expiry date, after which even I can't read it. So it's, a human failing that any part of our functionality, our capabilities we don't use, we lose. And this comes from a very interesting concept which was developed by a gentleman called Nassim Taleb in his book called Antifragility. Fragile things or fragile things are those where when you put pressure, they break or they go bad. Anti-fragile things are those which when you apply pressure on them, they become stronger. So he's got his own Western scripture examples, And in Indian example, we have Rakt Beej. The more you cut it, the more it becomes stronger. Similarly, human beings are also anti-fragile. The more you exercise, the better biceps you get. The more you will write, the more you will work hard, you'll do better in your exams. Everybody's parent has told them, and many of you who have kids are telling the same to your kids. Now we have the entry of AI. You don't need to think. Let ChatGPT think for you. Does that mean people will stop thinking? I'm sure some of us will stop thinking. Now, some of us will be making those good tools, some of us will be investing in those tools, and some of us will be using those tools. The ones who are using are the ones who shall not be using their minds. And slowly and steadily, some of us will get divided into two categories: those who can, those who can't. Critical thinking. Now, for people like me, it is important that people in our country think, but our friendly neighbors to the west and friendly neighbors to the east don't think. So I would really urge all our investors to invest in technologies for AI, which can be utilized not only in India, but in other countries also. Especially for those who can actually make the big data that we have stronger for us, and we have a better, I'll say, a better, stronger advantage over our adversaries. We have large language models coming in, but let me tell you, this is again a cat and mouse game. There'll be countermeasures. There'll be new tools which people like you will build and people like you will invest in, which shall poison the large language models. So there will be ways for you to know that your homework was done by a human or was it done by a computer. There'll be people who invest in that. There'll be people who will invest in helping you do your homework through computers. And there'll be people who help you know for sure that it was you who did it. So I am confident that India has a strong role to play in this all. But if I can have my way, I would like to stop our friendly neighbors to the west and east from thinking, and we create the tools that they use. How many of you think that that would be a good idea? That we use? At least I got one person to start with. Or maybe he's the only person who's listening to me. The others are only thinking about food. So, it is important that we look at AI in the right sense. We talked about NVIDIA, but I'm not very happy that you talked about NVIDIA. NVIDIA is past tense. The new technologies out there are chip scale integration. The full wafer of a chip. Maybe those of you who don't know, semiconductor chips are made on wafers. They're a big wafer and you cut it out and multiple chips come out. The best company right now, which if you're an investor you should go invest in, it's a company in the United States, is making a wafer scale chip for doing AI computation. Those are the kind of things which we'll see in the near future, which will take semiconductors itself to the next level. Those are chips which are not small, they're this big. It's an 8-inch to a 12-inch wafer, and the whole 8-inch wafer is a chip. Your mindset, my mindset right now is, chip is small. It's a small black thing in my phone. No. The new data centers will have that. And seriously, it's a concern for me that we just talked about NVIDIA, not those chips. Those are the ones that the United States and China are fighting over right now. We need to catch up to them. So with that, I'm going to close out my speech, but I'm more than happy to take any questions you have on chips, semiconductors, AI, our friendly neighbors, anything but the food because I haven't seen that yet. Please.
We recently have heard debates over how semiconductors and investing in semiconductor manufacturing for a developing country like India at this stage may not be the smartest plan to place on ramp up manufacturing in certain economies and segments. We're focusing in these sectors and focus rather on health regulation in giving subsidies to them instead of giving subsidies to semiconductor manufacturers. How do you see this opinion?
So, from what I understand is it good to give subsidies to semiconductors or not? Ma'am, your question is about 1 year too late. The subsidies to semiconductors have already been given to the tune of about 10 billion US dollars. We've already got Micron coming in. We've got Tata's investing in a fab. We've got CG Powers, which has got a fab. Now, some people feel that instead of making chips, we should build our own systems on top of chips, which is also a very good and fantastic idea. I don't think it's an either or situation, it's this and that situation. For example, how many of you in the audience know of a company called PrimeBook? They make the cheapest laptop in the country. 11,000 rupees on Flipkart and Amazon. And what is peculiar and unique about them is they have broken the standard Wintel model. Wintel is Windows for your operating system and Intel for your chips. So traditionally, if you go to buy a laptop or a computer, it's either an Intel or an AMD chip, the processor, and you usually run Windows. Some hardcore geeky people run Linux, like I run Linux, but most of us run Windows, or else we are on Mac. Mac also runs Intel under the hood. Intel inside, idiot outside. You know, you must have seen that phrase. It's an old one. So, from that perspective, this PrimeBook, and believe me, I don't have any shares in them. I would have loved to invest in them, but I saw them on Shark Tank just like many of you might have. They are using a MediaTek processor just like in your cell phone. They are using Android as their operating system. So the whole ecosystem of apps on your cell phone are now available to them on your laptop. A very peculiar combination. And that is why they could make the cheapest laptop for students and undergraduate students and class 12th and 11 students, for homework and all. It's a fantastic laptop. And eventually, I think they'll also grow it into connecting it to the cloud and have it as a terminal. And AI has come into our life. And that is how the future shall unfold. Does that answer your question, ma'am? Thank you so much. Sir.
Thank you.
I have an interesting thing about the mic I'll tell after this one, please.
Okay. So my question spans, it impacts everyone. It spans geopolitics, AI and security, which is your forte. How do we plan to protect against AI agents which other countries are building for war? One is the physical aspect of it. Second is the digital attacks. So we see many companies got attacked or many governments got attacked and that data was captured for the wrong reasons. So how do we plan for a defense?
So, in our country, I have a colleague in my office, in the NSA's office, called the National Cybersecurity Coordinator. We have a full task force which is looking at exactly this thing. We're trying to beef up the security and for our critical infrastructure. There's a lot of new activities we have gotten. We are working on looking at what all is happening all over the world. I'm thinking, should I say this or not? But I'll say, okay, this much. We are no less than any of our adversaries. If they can attack us, we can also attack them. And we, the cat and mouse game continues. And software is one thing where India is already a superpower. Indian talent is sitting all over the world. So we also know what all are the technologies out there which can be used in both covert and overt actions, as well as in offensive and defensive activities. So yes, you do hear sometimes that, this happened, that happened, but it is not what happened. It is the one that you did not hear, which did not happen, that we were able to, avert. Those are the ones which are what we are more proud of. And therefore, I would say we are doing a good job. If you have any ideas and all, or if anybody else has any ideas, I'm more than welcome. I'm going to be here after the session also, provided the food is, of my liking. So we are doing what is required to be done. And we have collaborations with all the countries around where we need to build the right relationships so that data is also shared, our attack methodologies are also understood, and counter-offensives are also put in place. Answers your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I guess one last question. Or we can call it a day. Two hands. I knew always when I say I'm going to call it a day, somebody will like, yes, sir.
Thank you, sir, for so much information without saying anything.
Mm-hmm.
Main question is that when we talk about AI and chips, we have seen a lot of progress that is happening in the country, and like you said, in the software field, even in the way we are utilizing chips and building things on top of it. How do you see India is progressing towards, say, drone technology and advancing towards utilizing the progress in AI and chips for national security, as well as, say, making sure that proliferates into commercial success as well in the country?
How you mean how are we utilizing semiconductors and in drone technology and other technologies?
Yeah. Do you see that the steps we are taking?
Yes.
Can we go towards building advanced drone systems which can be used both in defense forces as well as commercially viable systems within the country?
Absolutely. So, good question. And I'm glad that you asked this question, because in India, we have been building semiconductor chips for a long time that we are not aware of. When Pokhran 2 happened and the United States said, we're not going to give you stuff, we built our own infrastructure. They are not, I've said this so many times, there are not that many fabs in the world. Fab is where a semiconductor chip is made. There are not that many fabs in the world which can pride themselves in saying, our chips are sitting on the moon, our chips are sitting on Mars. Indian chips were utilized by ISRO in these probes which went to Mars and which went to the moon. Literally. So we have chips sitting out there which are made at Semiconductor Complex Mohali. And we have other DRDO fabs which are making chips for our defense equipment, like the light combat aircraft, the advanced light helicopter, the light combat helicopter. Many of you might have heard of Apache, the American combat helicopter. Looks pretty impressive. Looks like out of a Tom Cruise movie. Do you know that the Indian equivalent of the light combat helicopter can fly higher than Apache? Now you might think that this is a marketing stunt. Most of us might be in marketing, think we have to show something. The ceiling, the maximum height at which a helicopter can go is called, or a plane can go, is called the service ceiling. Now it is not that Apache is a bad helicopter, and it is not that light combat helicopter is superior. The needs were different, and that is why specifications were different. India has our troops on the highest battle station of the world. Which is that? Siachen. So we have a need to be taking care of our troops at that high altitude. United States does not have Himalayas. So they don't need a helicopter which needs to go to that height. But when we were making a helicopter, we said we need a helicopter which can go to that height because we need to be able to send food to our troops. We need to be able to sell ammunition to our troops. We need to be able to send troops and get troops back. So all that activity requires a plane which can fly at that height, or a helicopter that can fly at that height. So we have a lot of equipment that we don't go and talk about. We are not built that way where we'll say, this is all equipment which is, in the market for selling. There's a very subtle difference between a product and a weapon. And it could be the same entity. When I'm selling that product in the international market, standing at Paris Air Show or something, it's a product which is very similar to my selling, a car or any jeans or something. But in the hands of the soldier, that's a weapon that keeps him or her alive and takes care of the adversary. So there are subtle differences, and we are very well positioned. And now with the fabs coming in, we've got a larger ecosystem of semiconductors which will eventually go even further. So I am very confident that going forward we have a lot of policies in place and lot of work which is going into the AI and semiconductor ecosystem. There are two foundational technologies, AI and semiconductors. You yourself do an exercise and see what is in this room today, which was not here 100 years ago, and you'll find semiconductors playing some role. There are computers in some shape or form which have made that happen. Answers your question, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
I think it was too long, you had to say. So, you had a question, yes. Mike. While he's getting the mic, I'll tell you, in one of the panels where I was there, and I was talking about something called gray zone warfare. And I had to define what is gray zone warfare. And in the middle of my speech, I just stopped talking and I just moved my lips. And the guy who had the mic, he came running, and the moderator said, "Oh, the mic has stopped working. Can somebody get the mic, please?" And, there was a big panic. And I just smiled and said, I was not saying anything, only my lips were moving. That is a characteristic example of gray zone warfare. Without doing anything, I've put the moderator and the whole AV team under pressure. That is what China does in the South China Sea. They send their, fleet of helicopters and planes. We are going to go to Taiwan today. And everybody in Taiwan is very uncomfortable. Oh, the Chinese are coming. Nobody comes. They go back. But there is a price to be paid on the Taiwanese side for anything like this, or for any adversary. That's great. Yeah, sorry, I was just filling in as a filler.
So, sir, I have this question. See, whenever suppose if there is a sports tournament, the World Cup is coming. So, we Indians, we have this thing that if we have beat Pakistan, that is enough for us. So, in terms of AI and everything, so if we tell ourselves that we are better than Pakistan, is when we say adversaries, are we also thinking about China or the other advanced powers? How do we get ahead of them? So that is one question. Second question is that both the two, the emerging superpower China and US, both of them are these expansionist forces. So can India market itself to countries around the world, saying that you have to have one trusted intermediary in defense manufacturing, that maybe 60% of the supply chain could be in US or China for a certain defense equipment, but 30 or 40% has to be through us, so that we are that filter and we are that layer of trust. Only then maybe you should go ahead and buy defense equipment. Can we impress upon our friends in the world about this?
Good. Two questions. On the first question, I can say on sports and all, when we talk about Pakistan, that's, it's enjoyable. We have a good amount of competition in the games. When we come to real-time stuff, and I'll say this with confidence, Pakistan who? You tell me. Today or yesterday, there was this news in their parliament. The guy says, they are going to the moon, and our news says that one kid fell in the gutter. This was in the news. You can Google it. Their member of parliament saying this is the comparison. So why are we even having a comparison? And I just made a very subtle example to that, that I am looking forward to Indian entrepreneurs making AI tools which will make our friendly neighbors, both on left and right of our country, a little more dumb. This is my expectation from people like you. We sell cars in those countries, in Pakistan in specific. From what I understand, in Africa, the maximum two-wheelers come from India. AI and all these tools will even grow further. We will get larger models because we are a larger country. We have more scenarios that we can envisage. We got more companies. Tomorrow you will make a company, you'll make some models, somebody else will make another company, and then both of them would be bought out by a bigger company and those models will coalesce. So yes, and I think what we saw in Galwan and situations like that, India is not that of the past. Now we have a lot more that we are doing, and even countries like China are, thinking twice whether they should actually make some, moves on us in that perspective. So we are in a very strong position. We will go forward. Now on your second question, India has a very strong defense infrastructure base, DRDO. I'm quite sure some of you, or almost all of you know somebody who works at DRDO, either a friend or a family or a classmate or somebody's husband or somebody's wife. And I can tell you that there's a lot of work which goes out there. And we have done spectacularly well. I'll give you one example. India makes its own jet engine. We are trying to make in a Kaveri jet engine, and a lot of people feel, oh, it didn't do very well. Do you know how much of an effort does it take to make a jet engine? It takes about 2 decades of work. And almost every other country in the world has copied their jet engines from somebody or the other. So the original ones were made by Rolls-Royce, and then there was the Nazi Germany, which made in the World War II. So those were the 2 places which are made. General Electric and the Americans, they got some technology in G2G. The Soviets of that time, they stole the technology from the, I shouldn't say stole it, but they basically appropriated technology from Britain. And then they eventually were asked to pay a royalty fee for it, which they did. So everybody has, taken an effort. We have also built our own engine, and it took us our time. So we have our own engines, we have our own fighter jets, we have a light combat aircraft, we got the LCA, which goes higher than the Apache. We've got a lot of missiles. We've got a very, very vibrant and thriving ecosystem as far as the Indian defense infrastructure is concerned. Yes, we do use things from the Russian bloc and also from the European bloc and from the Americans. But what does that make us? We have the best cocktail of equipment, because the Chinese won't go and get the Americans, because the Americans won't sell them to the Chinese what they have. But we, thanks to our able leadership and the able leadership of people like our EAM, the Honorable Jaishankar Saab, we are able to work and have a good relationship on both sides. And that has been really strong and very helpful for us. So we've got in our arsenal weapons from all the best manufacturers in the world that we work along with DRDO. So it's not that we have untrusted weapons in our system. We look at all those systems, and there's a lot of internal engineering which is done to make sure that it all meets our needs. And sometimes it's interesting. We need to know all this because, like, for example, I heard this when I was a graduate student back in the day, that when they were doing the simulation testing for the F-16, they forgot to put sign number. Many of you are computer guys, so it was not a signed number. And so when the simulator went and crossed over the equator and went to the south, the simulator turned the seat upside down because it did not see that it was a negative. So those kind of things also happen. So that's the level of testing we do. Deep, does it answer your question? I think now we are hungry enough and we can call it a day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir, for those words. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. With that,